There is a my image is not coming. Just see. Hello, everybody. A warm good morning to all. We are very happy to invite you all to this webinar titled Linguistics and Phonetics. We are extremely privileged to have participants from all over the country and also from around 7 other countries. Without further delay, I would like to introduce the speakers for today. The first speaker for the day is Ms. Amrita Varshini. She is currently pursuing her research in the field of assessment and testing from Anna University, Chennai. She completed her master's from the Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning with a gold medal in English language and literature in the year 2018. She finished her bachelor's from the reputed Madras Prison College, Chennai. She has presented and published papers in a number of national and international conferences on English language teaching and has also won the Best Paper Award at a national conference. She has also co-authored a book meant for college students. Having cleared the NET and JRF exams currently, she also trains NET exam aspirants. Let us move on to the first session titled Language and the Human Brain. Over to Ms. Amrita Varshini.
You're not audible. Now you are audible.
Yes, sir, just a minute, sir. Now, is it audible, sir? Yes, so now, sir? Yes. So in today's session, we will be talking about the language and the human brain. Now, I'll start by sharing my screen now. Yes, so like we ask in general classes or in technical classes, I want you to answer this one question. Are you able to see me and hear me? If it is an yes to both these questions, just say yes, yes in the chat box so that we'll proceed with the session. Am I audible and am I visible? Is the screen visible? Yes, so let's move on. So today in this session, we'll be talking about the language and the human brain. So this is basically about how the brain is an important organ in language production and in language comprehension. So this is the overview of the entire presentation. We'll start by talking about the structure of the human brain or the anatomy of the brain. And then we'll look at language areas in the brain. We'll be looking at specific areas that are responsible for language learning and that are responsible for language production and comprehension. And then we'll move on to talking about tongue slips and tongue tips, which are nothing but errors or mistakes that are committed by people occasionally. And then we'll move on to talking about aphasias, which are serious language problems or disabilities. And then we'll talk about a psychological test that proves the functioning of the brain, which is called as the Dicotic listening test. And then we'll move on to talking about the critical period. And then we'll talk about two real life incidents, one of Phineas Gage and the other of Jenny. So we'll start with the structure of the human brain. You can send in your questions as and when you have a doubt. We'll try and answer them towards the end of the session. So the first is the structure of the human brain. Now, the brain, according to me, is the most intriguing and the most interesting component of language and the human body. And I say this with conviction because there have been a number of researchers trying to find out the functioning of the brain, the working of the brain, and so on and so forth. Now, the brain is roughly spherical in shape and is divided into three parts: the cerebrum, cerebellum, and the medulla oblongata. Now, the cerebrum is the largest part of the human brain, and it is composed of the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. The cerebellum is what is over here, which is called as, which is located just below the cerebrum. And then you have the medulla oblongata or the brainstem. Now, each of these parts perform different functions, and the cerebrum is, of course, the largest part of the human brain. Now, the outer layer of the brain is covered by a layer of neurons, and that is called as the cerebral cortex. And many cognitive functions are located in the cerebral cortex, and it is responsible for a number of cognitive functions. And furthermore, the brain is divided into four lobes: the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe. And this is the order in which it is arranged in the human brain also. And each of these perform different functions accordingly. For instance, you have the occipital lobe, which performs the function of vision. Now, moving on, you have the brain that is divided into two hemispheres. As I told you earlier, it is divided into the right and the left hemispheres. Now, both these hemispheres are joined together or connected by corpus callosum. And corpus callosum is a bundle of fibers. Now, the job of corpus callosum is to transmit signals from one side of the brain to the other side of the brain. And the functioning of the brain is described using this term, contralateral neural function or contralateral neural control. And this is predominantly common in vertebrates. Now, vertebrates are all those creatures which have a backbone and a skeleton. And contralateral neural control simply means that the hemisphere of the brain controls the opposite side of the body. Now, to explain this in simple terms, the left hemisphere controls the right side of the body, and the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. Now, this is one reason why when a person is attacked by stroke or a block or a hemorrhage, then if the block or the hemorrhage or the stroke is on the left side, the right side of the body gets paralyzed. And this is common only in vertebrates. Now, to explain more about vertebrates, these are creatures which have a backbone and a skeleton. For instance, you have frog, fish, man, lizards. All of these creatures which have a backbone have this function of contralateral neural control. The next important concept is that of lateralization and localization. Now, each hemisphere has unique functions which they perform, and that is also called as specialization. Now, each hemisphere or the hemispherical functions are asymmetrical. What one side of the brain performs is not the same as the other side of the brain performs. Now, for example, you have the right hemisphere, which controls abstract meaning, abstract reasoning, and physical tasks, and the left hemisphere controls language. Now, this explains the concept further, wherein you have the concept of brain lateralization, wherein the left hemisphere controls, analytical thought, detail-oriented perception, ordered sequencing, rational thought, verbal, cautious, planning, math, science, logic, right field vision, right side motor skills. Now, right side motor skills primarily to say that the right side, if I move this hand, then my left brain is in function. If I move this hand, the left hand, then the right brain is in function. So similarly, the right hemisphere, you have intuitive thought, holistic perception, random sequencing, emotional thought, non-verbal, adventurous, impulse, creative writing and art, imagination, left field vision, and left side motor skills. So now this is the concept of lateralization, wherein the functions of each of these hemispheres is clearly defined. Now, moving on, we look at the various language areas in the brain. Now, I don't want to go into the details of the brain because there are a lot of parts of the brain. Now, we'll not be talking about all these parts, but then we'll be talking about only 4 important major parts that are important for language processing and language learning. Now, you have 4 neural structures serving language processing. The first is called Bronchus area. Then you have the Wernickes area, arcuate fasciculus, and then finally the motor cortex. We look at each of them in quite a bit of a detail. Now, talking about Bronchus area, it is named after Paul Broca, who was the first person to identify Bronchus area in the year 1861, and it is also situated near the motor cortex. Now, to talk about the motor cortex is somewhere here. It moves on from this region. Like in this fashion, it moves on from here. It goes up till the central sulcus, but not into the central sulcus. So the motor cortex is something that controls the motor organs. Now I move my lips, that is because of the motor cortex. Now the primary function of Bronchus area is speech production. It is involved in speech production, wherein the neurons from the Bronchus area, they send signals to the motor cortex, and the motor cortex thereby sends these signals to the larynx, the tongue, and the mouth, which in turn sends the signals to the corresponding muscles, and that's how language is being produced. Now, talking about the next is the Wernickes area. Now, this picture will be there on all these 3 slides because to, in fact, identify these various parts in the brain. Now, talking about the Wernickes area, it was identified by Carl Wernicke in the year 1874. And it is located in the posterior section of the superior temporal gyrus. Now, there are, as I told you, a lot of parts. Now, one such thing is the superior temporal gyrus, and it is present posterior to the superior temporal gyrus. Now, and one important or easy way in which you could identify the presence of the Wernickes area is that it is located or it is situated between the auditory cortex and the visual cortex. Auditory cortex is responsible for hearing and visual cortex is responsible for vision. Now, this area, the Wernickes area, is responsible for language comprehension. That is what is the main function of Wernickes area, and it also enables the person to communicate coherent ideas. So now that is with the Wernickes area. Moving on, you have arcuate fasciculus, which is this fiber-like tissue that connects Bronchus area and the Wernickes area. Now, technically, the Bronchus area is called as the anterior speech cortex, and it is responsible for speech production, as I told you earlier. And the Wernickes area is responsible for speech comprehension. Now, the area between these two, or the fiber that connects these two, is called as the arcuate fasciculus. Now, this is basically, it performs the function of transmission, wherein it is a transmission center, something that is being produced or something that is comprehended. The output that is supposed to be given by that particular person is sent in the form of signals to the Bronchus area, and the Bronchus area in turn produces language. Now, that is how the brain helps in language production. Now we'll move on to a quite interesting and a humorous section, and also talking about these areas and how they were identified. We have a very interesting real-life incidents. We look at them at the end. But for now, we also have Penfield and Roberts, who in the year 1959 conducted an experiment to find out the functioning of the brain. And they found out that when there were electric current signals on specific parts of the brain, it actually hindered the production of normal speech. So that is how they found out that there are specific areas responsible for language production. Now, talking about tongue tips and slips, these are basically occasional happenings which happen sometimes, at times. They're not something that, it is not something that happens over and over again. And the brain and speech, they do not work together. Meaning to say that when you have, when there is a tongue tip or a slip, it means to say that the brain and speech are not in coordination, or they don't work together. Now, moving on, we have tips of the tongue. Now, this is a situation wherein the speaker knows the word, but then the word does not come to the surface. Now, the speaker basically knows the phonological outline of what the exact word is. Probably he knows the initial sound or the final sound, but then does not know the entire word. For example, you have fire distinguisher, person saying fire distinguisher instead of fire extinguisher. Now, the person is quite aware that it is extinguisher, but then he doesn't know if it is extinguisher or distinguisher. Now, that is a tip of the tongue, wherein the person is not sure of a few sounds, but then he knows the phonological outline of the word. Now, this is sometimes also called as malapropism, and malapropism is one concept that is named after Malaprop, a character from the play Rivals by Sheridan. Now, this character, Malaprop, while talking about a character, a female character, lead character in the play, she says she is as headstrong as an alligator. Now, she basically wants to say alligator, but then because she doesn't know the exact word, she ends up saying alligator. So now this term malapropism again comes from that particular character, Malaprop. Moving on, you have slips of the tongue. Slips of the tongue are common when people are tired, nervous, when they're anxious, or when they're intoxicated. Now, this is also called as spoonerism. Now, to talk about slips of the tongue, one example that I could think of right now is use the door to open the key. You generally say use the key to open the door, but then when you're tired, when you've finished a whole day of work and when you come back home, this has happened to me many a times. When I end up saying open the door using, use the door to open the key, wherein it is supposed to be use the key to open the door. Yes, now talking about spoonerisms, now this is also called as spoonerisms, and it is named after William Spooner, who is an Anglican clergyman, and he is basically from the Oxford University. Now, predominantly, he used to mix up these initial sounds, wherein at times he used to say noble tons of the soil instead of noble sons of the soil. And similarly, you have another very famous example. You have missed all my mystery classes. Actually, it is supposed to be you have missed all my history classes. Now, this has happened to us many times. Now, if any of this has happened to you, please mention it in the chat box. I would love listening to you too. The next is slips of the brain. Now, the result of a sound being carried over to the next sound, or probably a sound of one word is carried over to the next word. For example, you have black boxes, people saying black boxes for black boxes, because blur from black is carried over to boxes. Now, these are primarily errors of articulation. And then you have slips of the ear, wherein the brain does not make sense of an auditory signal that it receives. Now, supposing if a person says great ape, few people tend to hear it as grey tape or great ape. So all these are slips of the ear. Now, these are quite humorous, and they're also not very serious language errors, but they occur only occasionally, as I told you earlier. But then now we'll move on to look at serious language disorders, which are called as aphasia. Now, aphasia is a cognitive loss of language. Now, if anybody has something to say about slip of the tongue or slips of the tongue or slips of the brain or something like that, you could mention it in the chat box. Okay, Yukti has a very interesting example. I've heard people saying, go face your wash. Instead of go wash your face, people tend to say, go face your Wash. Yes, even in our day-to-day life, we tend to come across a number of these examples. So that primarily means that at that particular point of time, the brain and the speech of the person were not in coordination. Now, moving on, we'll talk about aphasia. Aphasia, as I told you, is nothing but a cognitive loss of language. Now, we have George Yu's definition of what aphasia is, wherein he says that aphasia is an impairment of language function due to localized brain damage that leads to difficulty in understanding or producing linguistic forms. Now, aphasia predominantly is an impairment in the language function wherein the person is not able to produce or comprehend language. Now, you have Bronchus aphasia, Wernickes aphasia, conduction aphasia, and aphasic universals. We look at each of them. Now, before we move on, we look at the causes of aphasia. Now, why does aphasia happen to people? The first primary reason is stroke. Now, 85% of people who suffer from aphasia have a medical history. Probably they were affected by stroke. Now, that is the case with 85% of the people. Then the remaining is probably because of head injuries from violence or by way of an accident that they lose their language speaking abilities. The first thing is Bronchus aphasia. Now, Bronchus aphasia is also called as motor aphasia, expressive aphasia, non-fluent aphasia, and agrammatic aphasia. I'll give you examples or I'll give you reasons why they're called by these names. Now, loss of ability to produce language is what is the characteristic of a person who's affected by Bronchus aphasia. And it is also characterized by reduced amount of speech. It is distorted articulation and which is generally slow speech. And this makes the person effortful. The person needs a lot of effort in order to speak. So it is also characterized by effortful speech. And it is called as agrammatic aphasia simply because you don't find these functional words in the speech of people affected with Bronchus aphasia. Now, they leave out all functional words. For instance, they leave out articles, they leave out preposition, but then they speak, what they speak is just content words. Now, we look at an example also later on. That is one reason. Now, this is primarily one reason why it is called as agrammatic aphasia, because they leave out all grammatical components or functional words. The next is non-fluent aphasia because the speech production is affected. Now, the Bronchus aphasia is primarily because the Bronchus area is affected. Thereby, signals are not sent via the motor cortex to the other regions. Therefore, there is a slur in the production of speech, thereby affecting the speech production. And therefore, it is called as non-fluent aphasia because these people are not fluent in communication. And it is also called expressive aphasia because they're not able to express what they feel. And these people or Bronchus aphasics are also characterized by a problem of forming the derivatives. Now, for instance, they would probably be able to find out or identify words like jewel, jewelry, jeweler, but then they'll not be able to find out that these are derivatives. Now, from jewel, you have words like jeweler and jewelry, but then for these people, these are just words. They're not connected in any way. And they're also characterized by the inability to comprehend metonymy and synecdoche, primarily meaning to say that they are not able to identify objects or things that are related. Now, when you say sword, they'll not be able to identify a sword with the king. Okay, so those are primarily the characteristics of Bronchus aphasics. Now, at the end of the slide, you also have an example. My cheek, very annoyance. Main is my shoulder, aching all around here. Now, this is an example of a person who's affected. This is an example of speech that is being produced by a Bronchus aphasic. Now, if you look at this particular sentence spoken by this person, you will realize that it is characterized by long pauses. In fact, I read it out fast, but then you have 3 dots, which means that there are long pauses and also a lot of hesitation in production of speech. And also to talk about the comprehension of these people is of course better, way better than the production, because it's only the Bronchus area that is affected. So therefore, the production is different. The production is difficult, but then they can easily comprehend language. Moving on, you have the Wernickes aphasia. Now, this is also called as receptive aphasia or sensory aphasia or fluent aphasia. Again, I'll give you reasons. Now, this is basically a difficulty in the auditory comprehension of a person. Now, as I told you earlier, the Wernickes area performs a particular function. Now, quickly in the chat box, please mention the function of the Wernickes area. Now, I want you to mention the function that is performed by Wernickes area with regard to language and language production. What is that one function that is performed by Wernickes area? Yes, any answers on what the function of the Wernickes area is? No, it's not speech production. Now, speech production is a function of, Bronchus area. Yes, Kritika, thank you. The answer is language comprehension. So Wernickes area is primarily associated with language production. So when the Wernickes area is affected, it simply means to say that the person has problems with understanding or comprehending language. So that is the thing that happens when a person has Wernickes aphasia. Now, these are, they can produce fluent speech because there's no problem with production here in this case. But then they have difficulties in understanding something that is produced. And also, you have a whole lot of monologues being spoken by them, which are just which is just babbling because they don't make sense. They're just talking about something, is just rambling. So it is also called as jargon aphasia because you have a whole lot of monologues with a number of words being used, but with with no sense or with no meaning to them. And also these idioms, a number of these idioms are understood literally by these people. For instance, if I were to go and tell a person that it is raining cats and dogs, he or she might think that it is raining literal cats and dogs. I mean, they might not be able to catch the idiomatic meaning that it is raining heavily, but then they'll take it, they'll consider these idioms literally. And it is called receptive aphasia because you have a problem in understanding something that somebody says. And also it is called fluent aphasia because you're fluent in your production of speech. As I told you earlier, it is just babble. They're whole monologues. So there's no problem with production. It is fluent. And it is also called sensory aphasia because you are just producing language. Now, moving on, we'll talk about this passage, which is an example again of a person who's affected by Wernickes aphasia. Now, in an attempt to refer to a kite, if a person with this problem has to refer to a kite, he'll just say this particular thing. Now, this thing is again from Lesser and Milroy in the year 1993. In their work, they had written this particular passage, and I've taken this passage primarily from McGregor's book, which was published in the year 2015 on linguistics. Now, to refer to a kite, this person will say this particular passage. It's blowing on the right and there, and over there's 4 letters in it. And I think it begins with a C, goes. When you start it, then goes right up in the air. I would have to keep racking my brain how I would spell that word that flies, that doesn't fly. You pull it round, it goes up in the air. From Lesser and Milroy, which was published in the year 1993. Yes, so this particular passage is an instance of a person who is affected by Wernickes aphasia, wherein you find the person using a number of these words. He has no production with, he has no problem with producing language or using vocabulary. For example, he says racking my brain, blowing. Now, all this will not be the case with the person affected with Bronchus aphasia. Moving on, you have anomia. Anomia is also an important thing or a happening that occurs when a person has Wernickes aphasia. Anomia is simply difficulty in finding the correct word. You don't get right words to put them in the right place. The next is conduction aphasia. Conduction aphasia is because of the damage of the arcuate fasciculus. By conduction, we mean something that transports. So as we saw earlier in the structure of the brain, the arcuate fasciculus is something that connects both the Bronchus area and the Wernickes area. Now, when a person has conduction aphasia, it means that this person has the arcuate fasciculus, the fiber that connects both Bronchus area and the Wernickes area, is damaged. This means to say that there are no signals or there's no information that is received by the Wernickes area being sent to the Bronchus area for speech production. And they are capable of understanding. Conduction aphasics are capable of understanding. They understand everything that you say because the Wernickes area is intact. Therefore, they have no difficulty in understanding. And there is difficulty in repetition because, the process of repetition is where you say something to a person, the person comprehends it, and then speech is produced. But now there's no connection between the center that comprehends the Wernickes aphasia and the Bronchus aphasia, the area that produces language. Therefore, there's difficulty in repetition. And these people also are not able to answer these questions that are being put forth to them because they understand the question, but then it is not being transmitted or the message is not being conducted to the Bronchus area. Now, it is again characterized by intact auditory comprehension and fluent speech production because both these areas are intact and they are in function. The next you have aphasia universals. Now, this is when the entire linguistic area of the brain is damaged. Now, when all these four parts of the left hemisphere are probably damaged, then in that case, it results in aphasia universals, wherein the patient loses language ability, both production, comprehension. He or she has nothing to do with language when a person is affected with aphasia universals, meaning to say that he has all these three together. He has both Bronchus aphasia, Wernickes, and also conduction together because all these organs are damaged. Now, moving on, we'll talk about this psychological test, which is called as dichotic listening test. It is basically a test. It is taken from the field of psychology in order to understand the concept of lateralization of the brain. Now, this is an experimental technique. You could try it even at home. Now, you make a person sit with earphones, and then there is one signal that is sent in through the right ear. There is another signal that is sent in through the left ear to the brain, of course. Now, you send a sound, probably dog or dove, through the right ear, and then through the left ear, you send cat or duck. Now, it is more likely that the person, who's wearing these earphones will hear dog or duck simply because it is sent in through the right ear, which means to say that language is being received very quickly by the left hemisphere of the brain. One signal that is sent in through the right ear, of course, we spoke about contralateral neural control, wherein the right side of the body is being controlled by the left side of the brain. So therefore, the signal that is sent in through the right ear reaches the left hemisphere first, because left hemisphere is the hemisphere that is meant for performing the function of language learning, language acquisition, and language production. So now that is with the dichotic listening test, wherein you make a subject sit with an earphone and one signal is sent in through one ear and another through another ear, say dog or cat through each of these ears. The sound that is sent through the right ear reaches the left side of the brain, and that is what the person has actually heard. Okay. The next is the concept of the critical period. Now, this concept is also, I'm talking about this concept also because it is associated with the brain. Now, we looked at the concept of lateralization, wherein I showed you the picture of a brain and then also the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, the various functions which these hemispheres perform respectively. We looked at them. Now, this lateralization, it is not something that is present in the human brain when the child or when the womb is just forming. But then this is something, the concept of lateralization or the lateral function of the brain is something that begins in early childhood and it moves on till puberty. Now, this is the time when language acquisition takes place to a large extent, and this period from early childhood to till puberty is what is called as the critical period, and it is also called as the sensitive period of language acquisition. And this concept of critical period is also being discussed by Selinka when he talks about interlanguage later on. But for now, you just have to remember that critical period is one time in a man's life or in a human being's life when he or she can acquire language to a great extent, because that is the time when the brain is active to pick up new languages. And that's one reason why we have English being taught as a second language right from school. I mean, those kids who have been in the system, say, since their early childhood, say, since class one, they speak better English. They're supposed to, in fact, speak better English compared to the ones who enter into this phase of learning English at a later stage. Now we look at two real life examples. Now this is sort of something that happened with these two people, Phineas Gage and Jenny. Now first thing is that I'll talk about Phineas Gage and the incident that happened with Phineas Gage. Now Phineas Gage is, he was a worker, and this incident took place in September 1848. And Phineas Gage was actually a worker. He was blasting away rocks to lay a railway track. So he was in the job of blasting these rocks. And what happened was, while blasting one of these rocks, there were these rods which just came, and there was an accident. In fact, a rock blasted, and these tamping rods, iron rods, they just came out, and then they pierced Phineas Gage through the cheek, and they came out through the brain. So like this, I think there were around 3 rods that went in through the cheek and came out through the brain. And after a month, the thing that happened is very interesting. There was no damage to his language abilities. He could speak. He was, again, he was up with no damage to any of his language learning abilities. I mean, he could speak, he could produce language, he could comprehend everything that people said. Now, that is something that opened the debate or the discourse on language and brain. Now, when this happens, it in fact means to say that there is language that is not being associated with the whole of the brain, but then there are localized regions in the brain that are responsible for language learning. That is called as localization. Now, language learning abilities are present in few regions of the brain, was what people could understand by looking at Phineas Gage, who was up and all going. The next is Jenny. Now, again, this is another real life incident where Jenny, in the 1970s, she was admitted in a hospital in Los Angeles, USA. Now, the flashback of Jenny is that she had been tied to a chair by her father. Her father was somebody who hated noise. So even the noise of playing with toys, it annoyed him greatly, and he used to come and thrash this little kid. And also Jenny was isolated. She was not allowed to talk to her mother. Even her mother was supposed to give some food and then go back. So Jenny had no exposure of people, or she'd never heard somebody speak. And there were, of course, no radios and no televisions in the place where Jenny was. So in this confinement, she had lived for quite some time. And when in the 1970s she was admitted to the hospital, she had no language, she had no language abilities, or she did not have a language to communicate because she had not heard anybody speak. And she in fact learnt language later on. Now this is outside the critical period. She learnt language outside the critical period, when she was after the critical period. Now, this means to say that language can be learned even outside the critical period. But then her language learning facility, or the facility with which she could use and produce language, was closed. Meaning to say that she was not given input for quite some time. And when you don't give input to your brain for quite some time, the brain loses that capacity. So she was able to learn, in fact, but then not all components of language. Now, this is like what we say now, if you don't use your brain, it gets rusted. So that's the same case. Now, her language learning ability had got closed simply because she had no exposure to language, and the language learning ability had not been given any input. Now, these are two real life incidents that again explain the functioning of the brain and the production of language, and how language is being acquired by people using the brain. Yes, with that we come to the end of the first session. Now, the concept of language and brain has implications primarily in interdisciplinary fields, wherein you have psycholinguistics and neurolinguistics also. I mean, talking about the brain and, in fact, a number of these concepts in detail. Now, to talk about the language and the brain, this is in fact a growing, developing area, and there are in fact a number of these articles. If in case anybody needs these articles, you could actually send in a message to my mail ID. I'll give it in the chat box. I'll give my mail ID in the chat box. Now, in case anybody has a question or a query, you could ask them in the chat box, please. Yes, so if in case anybody has a question or a query, you could ask it in the chat box. You could feel free to ask questions with regard to linguistics and also ELT. And also every now and then we have sessions on language, literature and linguistics. And today the second session is also by a very eminent professor on phonetics. So if in case you would like to be updated on any of these, any of these sessions, you could as well subscribe to the channel, because we'll be coming in with a number of other sessions also. Here, somebody says I have a problem of pronunciation with delivering my speech. Now, pronunciation is again one thing which all second language learners, of course, have a problem with. And this is because, we're not actually exposed to a lot of language and things like that. And that's one reason why we generally find pronunciation being very difficult. But then I think it comes with a lot of practice. It has nothing to do with the brain and the language production, because pronunciation is something that we acquire over a period of time. It is not it is not a problem with the brain or something like that. It's just that it needs a lot of practice and time. Yes, thank you all for sparing your time and also for listening to me. And now the next session is on phonetics. We'll have a very brief introduction to Professor, and then we'll listen from him. And yeah, in case you have questions, you could mention it even towards the end of the session. I'll try and pick up questions even after Sir completes his session. Thank you all.
The second speaker for the day is Mr. Jeevan Sagar. Mr. Jeevan Sagar is a graduate in Arts and MA in English Literature from Durga Mahavidyalaya, Raipur, from Pandit Ravi Shankar Shukla University, Raipur, with the merit rank. He has qualified UGC NET in July 2015. Adding to his credentials, he has done B.Ed from IGNOU and PGCTE from IFLU, Hyderabad. At present, he is pursuing his doctoral studies from Pandit Ravi Shankar Shukla University, Raipur. Prior to joining HNLU, he had been an assistant professor in Government Engineering College, Jagdalpur, under Directorate of Technical Education. He has also served as a lecturer in the Department of Education, Chhattisgarh, a teacher trainer, and an assistant professor in St. Vincent Pallotti College, Raipur. He has attended various cascade seminars on English language teaching, organized by the British Council, Cambridge University Press, and IFLU. Let us move on to the second session titled English Phonetics. Over to Professor Jeevan Sagar, sir. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your kind words and kind introduction.
Thank you, sir. We are indebted.
Great. Good morning, audience. It's a pleasure to meet you all this morning. And without any further ado, I would like to share my screen. Well, I'm going to speak on the topic English phonetics. As Amrita gave a very good presentation, I was all ears to her. It was really very enlightening and very enriching experience. I would also try to give my best to add to your existing knowledge in this particular field. Well, let's proceed. So I am Jeevan Sagar and I am an assistant professor in Hidayatullah National Law University, Raipur. So let me share the outline of the presentation. I will not tell you now. You'll have to.
The screen is not visible, sir.
Just a second. Just a second. Share my screen.
Yes, sir. Now it's visible, sir.
Yes. So let me tell
full
you
screen, sir, please. Full screen.
Yes, it's full screen.
No, sir, it's not.
Not yet.
No, sir. I think you have to enable editing and click slideshow, sir.
Now?
No, sir, not yet. You have to click enable editing and then slideshow, sir.
Where do I need to go for that?
So it's there on this slide. It says protected view, enable editing. You have to click enable editing.
Okay. Right.
Yes, sir.
Got it.
And now slideshow, sir.
Yes, got it.
Yes, sir.
Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm sorry for the initial glitches. Sometimes we have some teething issues. So it is one of them. So welcome to this presentation on English phonetics. And I have already introduced myself. So let me tell you the outline of the presentation. I will not tell you now. Be with me till the end. So basically, jumping on to the core area on which I'm going to speak, I would like to share certain things which would be very much germane to the topic I'm going to speak. Basically, language is a package of skills. It is a package of 4 skills. We can call it matrix also. And they are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So language is a total matrix of all these 4 skills. So when we take all these 4 skills, we can go for a further classification called receptive and productive skills. Listening and reading are receptive skills because we receive information, we receive inputs through these skills, through auditory skills, through through auditory organs, through visual organs, we get codes and we try to make meaning. So that's why we classify them as receptive skills. And second set of skills is known as productive skills. They are speaking and writing. We produce meaning by speaking and writing. So there is a difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is involuntary. Suppose a cracker explodes, then your ears are open. You can't help. I mean, your ears would sense those sounds whether you like it or not. There may be so many noises around you right now, but among those sounds and noises, you make a choice. I want to hear this particular sound. I want to go for this particular sound. So that is listening. So listening is not only sound perception, at the same time, it is meaning making. Similarly, decoding and reading. Decoding is a kind of mere recognition of letters or graphs, but reading is recognizing them and at the same time it's meaning making. If meaning making is not involved, it's not reading. If meaning making is not involved, it's not listening. All right. So we can also go for a different kind of classification of these skills. We can just classify them as primary skills and higher skills. So listening and speaking are known as primary skills. For these, for these 2 skills, we don't need any kind of formal training. I mean, when we are born, we see people speaking things and we just pick those sounds and we start imitating them. We don't need any kind of formal schooling for these kinds of things. We see there are people who don't go to school, but they speak language. So they know language. At least these 2 primary skills they have. If I talk about a person, say a rickshaw puller who has never gone to a school, but he speaks very good language because it is not about some formal training. But when I talk about higher skills, then they are reading and writing. For these skills, we need some kind of formal training. And I have used one, dichotomy, learning versus acquisition. Amruta just talked about learning and acquisition a couple of minutes back. That like when we pick language from natural surrounding, when we listen to our elders, our family members, our friends speaking a kind of language, and we pick it from that particular source, it is learning. So in case of our mother tongue, it is learning, language acquisition. We'll acquire language. But when there is a kind of formal training, some kind of support material, some kind of hand holding, some kind of walking through is required, then it is language learning. All right. So for reading and writing, we need some kind of language learning. So we will also talk about certain aspects and levels of the language. Let me do some reverse engineering. When we take language as a whole, it is basically conversation or anything that we do, like when we talk about certain thing, when we talk on a particular topic, then it is discourse. Discourse is not just a set of connected speech. It has some connection with one sentence to another. If I am speaking something and my next sentence does not have any connection, then you would not listen to me. So discourse is, closely associated with meanings. Then when we further fragment it, when we further dissect it, we get sentences and clauses. Then when we further do some dissection, we go to the level of word, which is known as morphology. Then from morphology, we move on to phonology. Now, when I come to phonetics, many people use these two words, phonology and phonetics, as interchangeably. It's not. Phonetics is a part of phonology. Let me throw a little light on phonology. If human organ of speech could produce some 70 sounds altogether, it's not necessary that all those 70 sounds are used in one particular language. We make a choice of few sounds, not few, but many of these sounds for one particular language. For an example, I belong to Hindi speaking belt. So in Hindi alphabet, we have 50 plus consonant sounds and 11 vowel sounds, right? K, kh, g, gh, like that. But when we talk about English language, we have 24 consonant sounds and 20 vowel sounds. Fine. So a language makes a choice of some particular sounds for its speech production. So the selection of those sounds and study of those sounds is phonology. We make those selection of sounds and we combine them, like through permutation and combination. We go on to make some other words. Then from those words, we make those sentences, clauses. Then we go on to the level of meaning making. We go to the level of discourse. So that is phonology. And phonetics is a part of it, where we study the production of a speech sound. So this particular figure would be telling at what level what happens. All right. So we as Indians learn the language. It is not we acquire English language. So it is a kind of learning, like we require some kind of higher skills. So we are not exposed to the native speakers. So basically, we heavily depend on our previous learners or our teachers or the immediate speakers of this particular language. So the whole idea behind learning English pronunciation is being intelligible in, like when I'm speaking English, others should be able to understand me. So for that, English pronunciation is required. So let's take some example here. I'm giving you a model conversation. You see that let's go to the Jew. To the Jew, why should we? We don't want to borrow any money. No, not that Jew. The Jew where you can see animals. The lion, the zebra, the giraffe. So the second one corrects. Oh, the zoo. To see the zebra, the giraffe? Yes, that's what I said, didn't I? So you see, what can pronunciation make? What difference can pronunciation make? We can see here. It was regarding consonant sounds. Now, let's see what happens with this conversation. One man asked, have you seen my ship? I didn't know you had a ship. Of course I have. It cries ba ba all the time. Oh, your sheep. It's on the hillside. Well, now another difficulty is we Indians feel is with vowel sounds. He wants to sell his boat. He wants to sail his boat. She's got a pen in her hand. She's got a pain in her hand. Don't you want to leave? Don't you want to live? He bit the dog. He beat the dog. They walked all night. They worked all night. So the problem with English is it is not the graph and the sound don't go together. Like it is not read as it is written. The Indian languages have a very good feature that they are read as they are spoken. Fine. As they are read as they are written. But English and I believe some other European languages have this kind of problem that they are not read as they are written. So there comes IPA in play. IPA is International Phonetic Alphabet. It is a kind of support system to understand the real phonetics, the real pronunciation of a particular word. So for the production of sounds, I would like to start with the organs of speech. I'm sorry for the black and white images. I don't have the color pictures, so it is from some my old book that I picked. So this is the human organs of speech, wherein this is the nasal cavity, this is the oral cavity, this is the windpipe, this is the food pipe, then upper lip, upper teeth, lower teeth, teeth ridge, then hard palate, soft palate, uvula. Fine. Then coming down, it's this entire part is tongue. The part of the tongue which can move freely is called blade. Fine. It's called blade. Then we move, then it is called front of the tongue, back of the tongue, root of the tongue. Then here, this just below the uvula, that part is known as pharynx. Then Down to it, we have got epiglottis, and here we have got vocal cords. All right. So vocal cords is a kind of valve which allows the pulmonic egressive air stream come to the oral and nasal passage. So it is a curtain-like structure, fine, which determines the quality of sound and the feature of sound. So vocal cords has basically two positions, wherein there is a passage, open passage, and the air stream can travel freely. And another is it is held together tightly. It's not closed, but it is held together tightly. So what happens is when the pulmonic aggressive air stream comes to the windpipe, then it does not find an opening. So it pushes through the vocal cords, making a kind of vibration. That's how we have voiced sound. When the vocal cords are open, we have voiceless sound, and when these vocal cords are almost closed, we have voiced sounds. So again, we need to understand the passage of air. So when pulmonic aggressive air stream reaches epiglottis, then there may be three circumstances, three situations for the air to come out. It, like when the air stream comes here and finds that the uvula has blocked the nasal passage, so it passes through the oral passage. So in this particular situation, we have got oral sound. Then another situation is that when the pulmonic aggressive air stream reaches the epiglottis, then when it travels further and it finds that the oral passage is blocked by the upper lip and the lower lip. So it travels through the nasal passage and gets released outside through the nasal passage. And that's how we have nasal sound like m, n, and ng. And the third situation is when the aggressive air stream reaches the epiglottis, and from there it sees that it finds that both the passages are open, the oral passage and the nasal passage. Then it travels, the air stream gets divided in both the part and gets released outside. So that's how we have got nasalized sound. In English, we have very few nasalized sound, and like they are also borrowed from other languages. In Hindi, we have many nasalized sound like Chand. So for this, we use the Chandra Bindu, Chand. And in English, for an example, root, then genre. So whenever we have a nasalized sound, we use a kind of diacritic on that particular vowel sound. All right, for an example, when we write root, so it is spelled as en, then space route. So just above e, we put a diacritic just to tell that this is a nasalized sound. Then consonant sounds. So when we, classify all the sounds of English, these are consonant sounds and vowel sounds. Let us not get confused with consonant letters and vowel letters. There are altogether 26 letters in English language, but when it comes to sound, it is entirely a different matter. So we have 24 consonant sounds in English language. All right. So don't be scared by looking at this chart. Like whenever, like we, especially the language teachers and the people of literature, are analog in their approach. They are not digital. So when something digital or statistical comes, I mean, they try to shun it away. But I hope after the explanation I'm going to give, it would be clear. So let's not go into the details in the beginning. Let us first discuss the sounds. The sounds are p, b, t, d, k, g, ch, j, f, v, th, the, s, z, sh, sh, zh, h, m, n, n, l, r, v, y. I have put an asterisk over here because some linguistic mavens consider v as a bilabial sound, whereas there is another school of thought which think that v is a labiovelar sound. So this is a slide which will take slight time. We have to be little patient with it, and let me deal with the nuances of the consonant sounds. Basically, consonant sound is described in three label terms. What are those three label terms? Whether it is voiceless or voiced. So here, for your sake, I have highlighted the voiceless sound as VL. It is highlighted in pink, and voiced sound is in blue ink. All right, I have not highlighted it. Now let me clarify what is voiceless and voiced sound. Just prior to this slide, when I was explaining to you what is the function of vocal cord, I told you that when the curtains of vocal cords are open, then the pulmonic aggressive airstream comes out without any problem, without any vibration. Fine. So such sounds are voiceless. But when pulmonic aggressive airstream reaches epiglottis and finds that the curtains of vocal cords are held together, means they are tightly closed. So pulmonic aggressive airstream pushes through it, makes it way, causing a kind of friction. So such sounds are voiced sounds. All right. So the first thing while describing a particular sound would be whether it is voiceless or voiced. Second thing is the place. From which place this particular sound is pronounced. Like here we would be talking about some active articulators, active and passive. Rather I should say the articulars involved. Some articulator may be passive, some may be active. So bilabial. So say when we see per, the sound per, see both the lips are coming together by two labia lips. So both the lips are coming together. So it is bilabial sound. Then labiodental, lip and teeth. dental teeth. Alveolar is the teeth ridge part. Post-alveolar is it's somewhere near the hard palate. Then palato-alveolar, then it is somewhere between the hard palate and the soft palate. Then palatal is the place where the soft palate is there. Velar, where we have got velum. Labiovelar is the velum is used, and at the same time our lips are also involved. So that is labiovelar. Then glottal, the glottis is involved here. So these are the places where the articulators are involved. Then manner, plosive, like when the pulmonic aggressive airstream comes to the oral passage and finds that the lips have closed the oral passage. So it comes into the outer atmosphere, or it gets released in the outer atmosphere with a gush, with a puff, fine, with a kind of explosion. Then it's called plosive sound. We will be dealing with example all these sounds, fine. Then affricate, it is something like when the pulmonic aggressive airstream reaches the oral passage, and unlike the plosive, it gets released into the outer atmosphere with some kind of ease. Fine, it does not get released with a gush, with a puff, but slowly. The lips open slowly, and the airstream gets released slowly. So this is the set of affricate sounds. Then fricative sounds. We have another thing, another set, fricative. All right, these are like these sounds also pass through our oral passage, and it is a bit continuous. It can be stretched for some time. That's why they are known as fricative. Well, I can see some questions in the chat box. Some people have said that plosive, fricative, affricate, lateral. Yeah, I agree. I have picked it from Flu block, and the mavens have this kind of views. So in my view, instead of being too technical, let us go to the practical application of this. We will be coming to that part later. Then we have got nasal sounds. So while I was explaining to you the passage of airstream, at the time I told you that when the oral space is blocked, fine, then the airstream would be passing through the nose, fine, the nasal passage, and in that case we have the nasal sound. Then the lateral sound. Here what happens when the pulmonic aggressive airstream reaches the oral space, oral passage, it finds the tongue as the obstruction. The tongue is raised towards the teeth ridge, so it creates a kind of obstruction. So the airstream passes through the rims of the tongue. Fine. So this is lateral sound. Then frictionless continuant. There we have got only one sound. It is like very continuous sound. So we would be dealing with it further. Then we have got semi-vowels. These two sounds, w and y, are considered as semi-vowel because of one reason. W, let's consider the sound w. So it looks that it starts at the starting point as u and ends at a. It becomes w. Same is the case with y. It starts at a point e and it starts, ends at a point a. So y. All right. Then we have got another school of thought where some people think that v is a labiovelar. So I would be coming to that. So I believe I have managed to tell you what is the three term. Fine. Whether it is voiceless or voiced, then place of articulation and manner of articulation. Now, let's do some three-term labeling of certain sounds. So now, let's consider the sound p. So it is a voiceless, bilabial, and plosive sound. P is a voiceless, bilabial, plosive sound. What does it mean? When the pulmonic aggressive airstream reaches the oral passage, it finds that both the lips, the curtains of the vocal cords are open. Fine. And it passes through the vocal cords easily without any vibration, and it reaches the oral passage. So it passes the first condition, that it is voiceless. Then when it reaches the oral passage, it finds that both the lips have closed the oral passage, and it gets released to the outer atmosphere with an explosion. Per. Fine. Per. All right. So you can put a finger in front of your mouth and you can just see per. All right. When we write the description of the sound b, the description of p and b gets different just because of the fact that b is a voiced sound. Now, how do you differentiate between the voiceless sound and the voiced sound? See, b is also a bilabial sound. P, b. When we keep a finger in front of our mouth, p, we can feel the explosion, the puff of the air. Fine. B, we can feel the same thing. So the difference is here in the vocal cords. All right. When we say p, we don't feel the friction, but when we say b, we see a kind of heaviness. Another test you can do is you can just close your ears, say p and say b. Then you can easily feel the difference between these two sounds. Fine. B sounds heavy. All right. This is the difference between p and b. Now coming to the sound t. Unlike Hindi t, in English t is different. In Hindi t, the position of tongue is slightly crooked, slightly twisted. Fine. So t, in Hindi it is t, but in English the tongue remains flat. T. Fine. So it is somewhat like aspirated. Fine. So it is voiceless. Now I would not be telling you what is voiceless, because I have already explained what is voiceless. So T is a voiceless sound. Now alveolar. So the place is alveolar, right? So alveolar region. So you see that the tongue raises towards the teeth rich part and comes down. Fine. That's why it is alveolar sound. Then its nature is plosive. Why? When we say t, when we say d, we can feel the gush of air coming out. It comes out with a kind of sudden explosion. So these are plosive sounds. Now, when I talk about the next sounds, next set of sounds, k and g, I don't need to tell you what is voiceless. I have told you. I don't need to explain what is plosive. I just need to tell you what is velar. So velar is like the region where there is velum. All right. So when we say k, you feel that it is somewhere near the pharynx. Okay. So k and g, these are pronounced from the velar region. All right. Now, so we can see that there are, 6 plosive sounds. All right, b, b, t, d, k, g. Now, affricate sounds. So I don't need to tell you what is voiceless here. I just need to tell you what is affricate. So unlike plosive, the air stream passes through the outer atmosphere with an ease. It does not come out suddenly. Say p, so it is coming out suddenly. But when I say ch, means the lips are opening slowly, and that's why the release of air is a bit slow. So ch and j. Fine. So these are palato-alveolar. These two sounds are, pronounced from the alveolar region. So the 3-term level would be for ch is the sound ch is voiceless palato-alveolar affricate sound. So we have 2 affricate sounds. All right. Then we come to the next segment called fricative. All right. Here I would like to tell you that plosive sounds are also known as stop sounds because it is one time affair. B, it gets stopped. We say b, it gets stopped. T gets stopped. All right. These are also known as hard sounds. Hard sounds. Like when you, I should say, when you go into the stylistics, you would be judging judging the melody of a poem through the selection of sounds by the poet. Fine. So when the sounds are plosive stops, then it is talking about something harsh. Then fricative sounds, some professors, some linguistic mavens call it what to say. I'm not able to recall that word. Anyway, when I recall, I tell you. Fine. So these sounds, these symbols are actually the realizations. We say f, we say v. Fine. F, v, th, d, s, z, sh, zh, h. Actually, these are very continuous sounds. For an example, if I have to tell you about this particular sound, this is not just f, it is when we, can you hear me? Then next is then next is, then we have then next is s. These are okay. I got that word. That is called sibilant. All right. So this z, sh, zh are known as sibilants. All right. So f, when we continue it like that, so we get the realization f. Then we can continue this sound also. So we realize it as v. Similarly, we can continue the sound like it depends on your lungs to throw the airstream for how long you can. So it does not stop at one point of time. It goes on. All right. So these set of sounds are used in syllabic consonant. Next set will be also used as syllabic consonant. All right. So f, v, th, the, s, z, sh, zh, h. This set of sound is known as fricative sound. So f is a labiodental sound. Why? Because the lower lip and the upper set of teeth, fine, both are involved. F. Similarly, v. All right. So some people say, sir, why do we have two v's in English? So one is labiodental v and another is bilabial v. So this is v and this is v. So this is the difference you must remember. All right. So in Hindi, we have h. H is bilabial and f is labiodental. All right. So this sound is realized by putting a nukta, a dot just beneath a letter. All right. Similarly, in Hindi, we have got th, but it is th. Fine. In Hindi, we have the, but in English, it is the, and the. So the tip of the tongue comes between the teeth. Fine. That's why it is known as dental sound. S and z. So the common feature in all these sibilants is that the tongue gets twisted. It gets curled a little bit. Fine. So that's why they are known as sibilants. S, z, sh, and zh. Fine. So I have already told you what is voiceless sound. I have also told you the feature of fricative sound. So the three-term level for s would be voiceless, alveolar, and fricative. And we have 9 fricative sounds, the biggest set. Fine. The smallest set is frictionless continuant, and the biggest set is fricative. Now, the nasal sound. Here we see that no nasal sound is a voiceless. All nasal sounds are voiced sound. Why? Because when the airstream reaches the epiglottis, they find that the curtains are closed. Fine. And they push open and travel through the nasal passage. All right. So, ma, na, ang. Fine. Ma, na, ng. So you can feel the friction here. All right. Then we have lateral sound. So as I told you a couple of minutes back, that say when the pulmonic egressive airstream reaches the oral passage, it finds the tongue as the obstruction. Suppose this is the upper roof of the mouth. These are the teeth. and let me take it as a tongue. So the tongue would be, the tongue is raised towards the fine teeth ridge. So the air stream finds it as an obstruction. It cannot pierce through it. So it passes through the rims of the tongue. It passes through the rims of the tongue. So when we say l, l, so see, air stream is coming through. It is very funny. It is very interesting. So that is how we have l sound. So you can see as fur is, fur can be continued. Similarly, ma could be continued. Mm, mm, mm. Similarly, L also can be continued. It is something like L. All right. So that is why you must have seen that in many of the words we get across the concept syllabic consonant. This is due to the stretchable feature of these sounds. So fine, for an example, enthusiasm, zum, see z, fine. Then lime kiln, see this is l, fine. So that is why these sounds are used in syllabic consonant. The next sound is frictionless continuant. This is r, r. So it is quite intermittent. Fine. The tongue moves like the wings of the hummingbird. R. So I believe in American English, we use rolled ra, r, father, but in British it is plain flat ra, r. Fine. Then next set of sound is known as semi-vowel. All right. So v and ya. So we have two of these sounds. So this is how you can make three-term level for all these sounds. I have used my notes just to tell you that this is how we make the three-term level. Fine. Per is a voiceless bilabial plosive. Ver is a voiced plosive. Ver is a voiced bilabial plosive. Ter, voiceless alveolar plosive. All right. This is how we can do three-term level of all these sounds. Now, after going through the consonant sounds, I would be just telling you, I would like to take you back to the consonant sounds. Here that most of the sounds are found in our own mother tongue, be it Hindi, be it Malayalam, be it Tamil, Telugu, or any of Indian languages. We find many common sounds like pa, ba, ta, da, ka, ga, cha, ja. Fine. This j sound is not found in English, so not found in our Hindi language. This is typically a British sound, j. Fine. So you need to keep this thing. And in North India, people are challenged between this sa and sha. Fine. So instead of saying, "Are you sure?" they may end up saying, "Are you sure?" Fine. So it may cause a big fight. Fine. Because sure means pig. All right. So that is one situation. So this thing has to be taken care of. Then th and the. These are dental sounds. If you don't want to be a purist, uh, you can go for the sounds which exist in your language. Fine, it is the task of a pure English language teacher, but still, like if you want to learn a language, learn it in totality. So the and the. So these are the sounds you must be careful. All right. Then coming to the vowel sounds. So you must have read that there are 5 vowel letters: A, E, I, O, U. So there are 5 letters, vowel letters. But when we come to vowel sounds, they are 20 in numbers. How? Let us see. So there are 12 pure vowel sounds. Fine. Then what about 8? It is short, 8 short of 20. Fine. So we would be dealing with those 8 sounds in later slides. All right. So there are 12 pure vowel sounds. All right. So as Amruta described the human brain to you in very beautiful slide, using a very beautiful what to say, labeled diagram, the linguists see the tongue like this. If a mathematician looks this figure, for him it may be a trapezium, but for a linguist it is a tongue. And now you all who are English language learners, it should be the tongue for you. Now, how do we describe the tongue? All right, this is the height of the tongue. All right, I have written close, half open, and open. This is the height of the tongue. And front, central, back. These are the part of the tongue. So, then next, like when we describe a particular vowel sound, then we describe it by using uh, describing whether it is uh, a front vowel or central vowel or a back vowel. Then we have to tell whether it's a closed vowel, half closed vowel, half open, and open. All right, the part of the tongue and the height of the tongue. Another feature is the shape of the lips, whether it is rounded, unrounded, or neutral. All right, so we would be dealing with it. So the first pure vowel sound is E, like sheep, keep, reap, teeth. All right, then next is E, short E. Fine, like it, itch. Fine, kick. So let's compare sheep, ship. All right, then what else? Heap and hip. All right, so this is how we can compare both the sounds. So next is A sound, pen, hen, yes. All right, then next is A sound, like pan, cap, have. All right, bat. Then next sound is ah, long ah. See, you can see a length mark here. You can see a length mark here. So these length mark are the what to say, a kind of indication that they are long vowel sound. All right. So car, arm, father, brother. All right. Then we move on to the next sound. This is aw sound. All right. In Hindi, we don't find this kind of sound. Fine. Like that's why I say we have A and O. Fine. That's why most of the North Indians say, where are you going? I'm going to office. All right. So it is not office, it is office. So it's like aw. Fine. Then the seventh sound is like it's a long vowel sound and it's a bit difficult. I found it a bit difficult for most of the Indians because it is like I have to say quote. In Hindi, we say in not only Hindi, many of the Indian languages, it will be like court. I'm going to court. So it is pure O. But in English, it is O. It is I'm going to court. Fine. I'm going to call you. So it is something like from U, it raises up to O. Call. I'm going to call you. I'm going to the court. Fine. Then from here, we move on to the next sound, that is short U, like put. It is this sound is the invert omega. All right. Put, cook, hook. Then next is the long U sound. Cool. All right. Then school, rude. These are the sounds which we like this particular sound is used. These are all the symbols and the sounds are represented by these symbols. After the sound, this one, I would be coming to the next sound, that is the sound A. I'm sorry for my ink, it has spread. It is actually invert V. Fine. When we invert V, it becomes like that. It looks like N here. So you can refer to any good phonetic dictionary. It is A. Fine. So cut, but. All right. So that is the sound. It's a quick sound. Next is the sound It's a long sound. When is prolonged, then we have All right. Like third, curse. And the last of the vowel sound is so small, so short that it cannot be pronounced in isolation. That is why this is the only sound in English which has been given a name, schwa, S-C-H-W-A, schwa. All right. So it has two positions. We would be talking about it in the later slide. So the sound is fine, like go, America. It is taking place in the initial position. It can also occur in the medial position. Fine. So it is different. So it is not different, different. So runt. So that is there. Fine. Instant. It's not instant, instant, infant, like that. So it can occur at the initial position, medial position, and in the final position. All right. So this is how you can use the three-term level. Let me tell you that for an example, if I have to use a three-term level for the sound E, then it's a front vowel. It's a close vowel and it's an unrounded vowel. Let's go back to the previous slide and it would be clear. So see, the front part of the tongue is used for the sound E. So E is a front, close and unrounded vowel. Why? Because when we say E, see, it is not rounded. Fine, it is a spread. E. All right. So let's take the example of short E. So it's a front vowel. Let me be here only so that it would be clear for you. E is a front unrounded vowel between close and half close. All right. So this is how you have to do the three-term labeling. So this is how I have tried to do the three-term labeling. A is a front unrounded vowel between half close and half open. A is a front unrounded vowel just below the half open position. Then A is a back open unrounded vowel sound. Let us go back. See, A. It's a back sound. Okay, it is pronounced from the back part of the tongue. Then it is open. Fine. The height of the tongue is open. And when we say A, see, lips are spread. All right. So A is a back open unrounded vowel. O. So it's a back sound, it's an open sound, and rounded, lips are rounded. So see, O is a back open rounded vowel. So this is how you can do the three-term labeling of any vowel sound. All these things can be found in some good books on linguistics and phonetics. All right. So I would leave certain things for your discretion and exploration. Now, when I talked about the vowel sounds in the beginning, I told you that there are 20. Out of 20, 12 are, say, pure vowel sounds, and next 8 are called diphthongs. Those pure vowel sounds are also known as monophthongs, but monophthong is not that current word. We call them as pure vowels, and these 8 sounds as diphthongs. They are also known as vowel glides. So they are 8 in numbers. So for the sake of study, we classify them into 2 segments: centering diphthong and closing diphthong. So centering diphthongs, they are 3: ear, air, and oor. And closing diphthongs are 5 in numbers, like a, I, o, ow, and oi. We would be dealing with them. Why do we call these 3 as centering diphthongs? See, E is a front vowel, but it glides towards the center. Why? The schwa sound is a center vowel sound. Fine, central vowel sound. So it glides toward the central. So all these 3 glides, all these 3 vowel glides glide toward the central vowel e, fine, ear, air. then u, a, ua. So clear, here, tear, then air, tear, fair, then poor, doer, pure, cure. These are the examples of centering diphthongs. Then these are the closing diphthongs. Why? Because when we consider the height of the tongue, see the second part of this vowel glides. See, it is E. A, I, Oi. So E is a closing element. So A, I, Oi. Fine. So it starts from A and glides towards E. Fine. Then here we have I. And mind you, dear friends, see this particular symbol which I have used in I is not a part of those 12 vowel sounds. Fine. It is a symbol of a cardinal vowel. This symbol is used in two places in two diphthongs, I and OW. All right, I and OW. So this you must be aware. And one more thing, while using a phonetic symbol, please don't mix it with your cursive running style, cursive writing and all. I mean, as you see them in a good dictionary or linguistics book, phonetics books, you have to follow that pattern, right? We don't have to corrupt the phonetic symbols. So there are five closing. So 3 close with I, fine. E sound, A, I, and Oi. So A is rain, Spain, tail, fine, pain. So it's a very beautiful sound. It gives beauty, it adds beauty to your English. So you can practice one sentence like rain in Spain mainly takes place in the plains. When you say this sentence again and again, you would get the feel of it, and you would, really wonder how English sounds. This is I, like time, fine, kind. All right. Then next is oi, like spoil, toil, coil. When we say boy, it's not boy, it's boy. Fine. So it is E, boy. Toy. Clear? Year never occur in the final position. It is E. Fine. Then next is O. All right. You can see the cursor where I'm moving. Actually, it has got two variations. In British English, in some of the dictionaries, I saw that it is O, pure O and O. O. And in American English, they use this. But I found in most of the phonetic books, they interchangeably use this particular symbol. It is O. So, like gold, told, hold, rose. Okay. Next is ow, like now, cow, how. All right. So this is how we have 3 centering diphthongs and 5 closing diphthongs. Altogether, we have got 8 diphthongs. Well, these are the references which I went through for the preparation of these slides and my presentation. If you have got any query, I can share my views on it. And at the same time, I would like to thank you for your patient listening. This is my email ID. If you have any query which probably this presentation could not cover, you can feel free to write to me, and I would be more than happy to reply you. Let me take a few questions if I don't see any questions. So
we've had few questions.
yeah, please.
So shall I answer those ones which were directed to me, and then I'll read out the questions to you, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be fine.
Uh, yes, sir. Just so that you take a break, in fact.
Yes. My vocal cords need little bit rest because after speaking so many voiceless and voiceless sounds, I mean, it has become voiceless.
Yes, sir. You can take a break now, sir. To answer these questions, I've received about 8 questions. So a
Yes.
lot of them have been about pronunciation and about these slips of the tongue, malapropism, and so on and so forth. So the first question is about the convenient areas of ELT during testing times, troubling times as this, like the present one. So one thing which we could probably look at is the online teaching and learning that's going on. That's the in thing now because of the present times, and also the digital divide that exists between students, because technology is not something that is accessible to everybody. So that could be one thing with regard to the present times. The next question is about the problems like slips of the tongue and malapropism. Can they be categorized under a disease? If so, any cure? Now, as I told you earlier, these are just occurrences that are occasional. They're not diseases. In fact, they cannot be categorized under diseases, and there are no cures because they are just the result of fears, stress, anxiety, or intoxication, and so on and so forth. And the next is about universities offering MA linguistics through the distance mode. So in fact, you could check out on the IGNOU portal also for courses on linguistics on the distance mode. The next question is if I could suggest any activities to overcome incorrect pronunciation. Yes, this has been asked also once again when how to pronounce, or sorry, how to overcome stammering while pronouncing specific sounds. Now, one thing which I used to do as a kid was playing around with these tongue twisters. Like when we were in school, we were given a lot of tongue twisters. So that's probably one way in which you could avoid stammering when there are similar sounds, basically. So we had this very famous tongue twister, bitty butter, bitter butter, but it was bitter, so bitty butter, better butter to make the bitter butter better. So things like that, they might interest students also. So such devices or activities can be incorporated inside classrooms to avoid stammering when pronouncing similar sounds, and also to improve incorrect pronunciation. Probably this will be helpful. The next is techniques followed in ELT from past till now. Probably, I mean, by techniques, what I understood was the various teaching methods, teaching methodologies, teaching materials which have been used. So from the past till now, to arrange them chronologically or in a particular sequence, we could start by talking about the grammar translation method, and then we moved on to the direct method, and then the bilingual method, and then communicative language teaching. So that is the way in which various techniques and methodologies, in fact, evolved in the field of ELT from the past till now. And at present, we also have communicative language teaching. Apart from that, we also have community language learning. And to talk about mispronunciation, there's one participant who says that these are the real problems of our students. Yes, and that's probably because we are not exposed to a lot of language with the correct pronunciation. Now, in fact, when we look up in the dictionary or when we do a simple Google search of a particular word, these days we also get the phonetic transcription of it, and we also get, I mean, there is also an image, a voice that actually pronounces the word for us. So that could be used as a very powerful tool in order to make students pronounce correctly. And then the next is, how is a normal child able to acquire language effortlessly? What is the connection between the human brain and language learning? Now, as far as first language is concerned, sir also made the distinction very clear between acquisition and learning. First language is something that is always acquired. It is not something that is learned, so it comes naturally. And the reason why it comes naturally is simply because acquisition takes place under natural settings. There's no controlled environment in which acquisition takes place. And also, if you look at the stages in which language acquisition or first language learning takes place, we have a number of stages in which it takes place. For example, you have the cooing stage, you have the babbling stage, you have the holophrastic stage. So, language acquisition, as far as the first language is concerned, it takes place through a number of stages. So that could be an entirely different discussion, because it starts with the one word stage, wherein you just say a few words like ma, pa. This child just begins by saying these things, and then the child moves on to talk, moves on to speaking in fragments in the babbling stage. And then in the cooing stage, you also have the holophrastic stage, then the telegraphic stage. I mean, by the time the kid is 4 years old, it has near about 10,000 to 15,000 words in its vocabulary. So that is how, language acquisition takes place. Now, the relationship between first language acquisition and the brain is something that was being talked about by Chomsky. Now, Chomsky, when he spoke about first language acquisition and how a child readily acquires a language, he talked about the presence of LAD, which is present inside the human brain, language acquisition device, which makes it easy for the kid to acquire a particular language. And also you have the concept of universal grammar. Now, these are various components present in the human brain which enable a student to learn a particular language. Yes, so these have been the questions so far with regard to the first session. Now, moving on to the second session, I've made a list of these questions, sir. The first question is the divisions in phonetics. What are the divisions in phonetics?
Yeah, there are like divisions like articulatory phonetics, auditory phonetics, and all, but I'm not able to recall exactly. I remember two of them. So I would just note it down, and like maybe through mail I can be able to send the answer.
Yes, sir. So, sir, about these articulatory phonetics and things like that. Now, articulatory phonetics is basically about the organs of articulation. And then we have acoustic phonetics, and also we have auditory phonetics.
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir. So, yes, the next question is something that you've answered, sir. It is about diphthongs. What are diphthongs? So that's something you've actually answered in the presentation. If you want to answer it, you could actually take up this question, sir.
Well, I have already explained it to you that diphthongs are basically the vowel glides. It is like from one, it starts from one vowel and glides towards the other. Fine. It is basically diff, di means two. It's a combination of two vowel sounds. Yes.
Yes, sir. So moving on, we have the next question. What is the difference between plosives and fricatives?
Very good. Like when the pulmonic air stream reaches the oral passage, and it finds that the lips are the obstruction, then the air stream moves out to the outer atmosphere with a kind of force, say per. Fine, I'm saying per. So like I put my finger here and I can feel the puff of the air. So that is plosive sound. When I say fricative, it is like there is a small opening and the air release time is more. Like when I say f, so it does not get released to the outer atmosphere with a kind of explosion. Rather, it comes out very slowly. So that's the difference between plosive and fricative sound.
Yes, sir. So moving on, we have the next question. Why is the inflection sir realized in cats and the realized in bags?
Yeah, it's a very different area together. Like the movement of the tongue finds it bit difficult. So that's why the stop sounds, for an example, when I talk about the voiceless sound and the voice sound, fine. So the voiceless sounds like p, t, and k, fine. They would take the sibilant s, fine, like caps, hats, or books. But when we talk about the voice sound, fine, like b and d and g, so they would take z sound. Fine, it is realized as z. For an example, cubz, cups, cubs. Fine. Suppose if I say cup, then s. If I pronounce it as z, then the p becomes b. Cubs. Fine. So that is the thing. Then when I say huts, fine, huts, huts. So suppose I make it z, then it become huds. So t becomes d. So this is the natural arrangement of this thing. That's why the inflation is like that,
So can
because
I
of the voice.
summarize this thing, sir?
Yes, please.
So in case of voiceless sounds, the plural inflection is sa, and in case of voiced sounds, the plural inflection is za,
Yes.
and in case of words ending with sa and za, it's is.
Is, yes.
The phonetic.
In case of affricates like say ch and j, bench, benches, fine,
Yes, sir.
like judges, like that.
Yes, sir. So the next question, sir, what are sonorant sounds?
Sonorant sound. These are actually different nomenclatures. Uh, I believe I should not throw a wild guess, so I would not tell you right now. I need to go through it, so I would like to apologize.
Okay, sir. Sir, to answer that question on sonorants, may I, sir?
Yeah, please.
Yes. Obstruents and sonorants. So obstruents are all sounds which are produced by way of an obstruction. All vowel glides and vowels which are pronounced without friction are sonorants. So that's basically the difference between obstruents and sonorants. So the next question. Sure has two pronunciations. Which do you prefer, sir?
Yeah, like sure and sure. These are the two variants of this pronunciation. If you don't have any problem with sir and sure, then go with sure. And if you have any problem with sir and sure, then go for sure.
Yes, sir. So moving on, how to pronounce homonyms?
Yeah, like homonyms have the same kind of pronunciation. So now I personally go for the classification homograph and homophone. All right. So principal and principal, Principle, Principal. Both the words have same pronunciation. So where's the problem? There's no problem in pronouncing them in the same way. All right. If the pronunciation symbol is same, we have to pronounce like that.
Yes, sir. So the next question, can you suggest activities for students to remember these sounds?
Well, as Amrita suggested a couple of minutes back that there are some tongue twisters. So tongue twisters are very helpful, like what a lot of water in this watery place. Fine. Then see, she sells seashells at the seashore, like that. You should make a collection of these kinds of sentences, and frequently practice this thing with the students. And it is a matter of practice. First collection of these kinds of sentences, and loud reading is something which is very important. You can go for some declamation sort of thing, so you get a very hands-on experience of good pronunciation, good intonation, good pauses, good rhythm.
Yes, sir. So the next question, so could you please throw more light on pragmatics?
Pragmatics is a kind of discourse analysis, like if I'm talking to you right now, so it is connected speech. One sentence is connected to another, the next connected, next sentence is connected. So it's a series of connection. So the series is not broken, like there is a connection in meaning. So meaning is not lost. Even if we speak thousands of words, the meaning is not lost. So this is the discourse.
Yes, sir. The next question, sir. What are the different types of airstream mechanisms?
I believe I have explained it to you. When the pulmonic aggressive airstream uh, reaches the vocal cord, there are two situations. Either the vocal cords are open or they are closed. Fine. So when the vocal cords are open, we have got voiceless sound, and when they are closed, we have voice sound. Fine. So one, this is the thing. Then when we talk about the release of air passage, so it may be done in through three ways. If the oral passage is only open and the nasal passage is closed, we have got oral sound. When the oral passage is blocked and the air stream passes through the nose or nasal cavity, we have nasal sound. And sometimes both the say passages are open, then we have nasalized sound.
Yes, sir. So the next question is how to make teaching phonetics easy?
It is something like what to teach and how to teach. Like you yourself must be well versed and well acquainted with the nuances and the registers of this thing. And it is not making another English language teacher. Like the thing which I discussed with you, it is a part for English language teacher. We cannot pass all these things as it is to the students. We have to pass this thing in a way practical thing. Like when I'm teaching a particular text to a student, I am reading certain thing, and when I pronounce the words, the sentences properly, they catch it. So listening and speaking, both the things are happening. So when I talk about say teaching the students at primary level, we cannot give them these symbols. It is for the teacher. Fine. So it is something like adopting and adapting. Read these things, adopt them, fine. But when you are teaching in the class, adapt it.
Yes, sir. So the next question is how are linguistics and phonetics important in literature and writing?
Very good. What is literature made of? Literature is made of language. Fine. So unless one understands the nuances, the intricacies of language, one cannot reach the level of understanding of literature. So linguistics plays a very vital role. Similarly, let me give you an example. When I have to use Raudra Ras, when I have to speak of a war or something ferocious, then I cannot be going with fricative sounds or say the liquid sounds. I have to go with the plosive sounds or the hard sounds. So when you read the poems um, like war poetry and all, which uh, talk about the sadness or the grievous part of war, fine, then we see more of nasal sounds in them. So when we read the poem of William Wordsworth, we find more of fricative sounds than the plosive sounds in his poems. So that's how uh, when you study, say, stylistics, the knowledge of phonetics helps you to understand the mood of the poet very beautifully.
Yes, sir. The next question is, can you say about syntax and semantics? Something more about syntax and semantics.
Yeah, these are the registers of linguistics. So semantics is basically about the meaning making. It is related to morphology and all. So how a word makes a meaning, fine. And syntax is like structure of the sentence. How do we structure a sentence? Uh, like simple to compound, compound to complex and all. So syntaxing is basically the structure of a sentence. It's a level of language.
Yes, sir. So, next question, sir. How could we find out if the pronunciation is correct or not? Because it is not possible to check every time the pronunciation of a word on Google.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful question. I appreciate it. Well, uh, the first thing is that we should use a very good standard dictionary like Oxford or Cambridge English pronouncing dictionaries by Daniel Jones and all. So these two are a kind of essential books for an English language teacher. So Daniel Jones dictionary is considered to be standard. So for that you need to listen to, say, good news channels to get the right feeling of the correct pronunciation. Listen to say BBC, but BBC listening to BBC or CNN just at the elementary stage would disappoint you. So go with NDTV or something like that. They have got very good English speakers, so that would be really wonderful. And at the same time, uh, if you can go to a language lab, and there is a software called Rosetta Stone. It is by Cambridge University, and I believe there are so many other softwares which check pronunciation. You go there and sit, you record your voice, and they have got a kind of sample voice already fed, so there is a comparison. So if you reach somewhere near it, like on a scale of 10, if you reach 7.5, your pronunciation is at par. We cannot ape the natives. It cannot be 10 out of 10. So that is how you can do it. And at the same time, you can, I should say, that record your own voice. Fine, you read a particular text and record your own voice. Just listen to it. You yourself will get a honest feedback. Amruta.
Next question is how to overcome mother tongue influence.
Like swimming is learnt by swimming, climbing a tree is learned by climbing a tree. Similarly, it is like most of the time the pronunciation or the intrusion of words, like in North India, people use key instead of that. I was saying key instead of saying I was saying that. So you have to be constantly vigilant, that make a list of the things, what are the, you know, what are such kind of influences, make a note of that, and whenever you feel that yes, I have committed this kind of error, immediately correct it. Nobody's going to shoot you for that kind of correction, right? At the same time, when it is the pronunciation related thing, the moment you become aware that yes, I have made this mistake, correct it. It will happen once, twice, thrice, then next time when you speak, it will flow automatically.
Yes, sir. So the next question is, how can you overcome mother tongue influence?
I believe, what was the previous question then?
Sir?
What was the previous question? I believe
Yes,
it is.
yes, sir. Sorry. This is the same question. So the next question is, mention one correspondent course from IFLU.
Well, PGCTE is the course which I did last year. So it's really wonderful. If you can enroll for this course, you have to attend 1 month contact program in FLU, and you would meet very good professors, the learned professors over there. Yes.
Yes, sir. So I think we're done with the questions, sir. We finished almost all questions, sir.
Yes.
Sir, the name of the software.
It is Rosetta Stone, ROSETTA STONE, Rosetta Stone. It is by Cambridge University Press.
So one last question, sir. Please throw light on syllabification.
Well, syllabification, like when we say one particular word, so one word has got a kind of breath groups. We divide it into different groups. Like if I say preparation, so it's a say group of 14 letters, but it has preparation, 4 syllables. See, preparation. So every every breath group is known as syllable. Fine. So one syllable has a nucleus vowel sound. It has to have one vowel sound, like pre. So before pre, no. So before the sound a, there is a consonant cluster p, pre, p, then p, re. So r, then a, then shan. So every syllable has to have one nucleus vowel sound. But there are some exceptions. Like I told you that some consonants are known as syllabic consonant. Like when I say heroism, HEROISM. So in dictionary, you would see that it is symbolized like that. So we don't read it as heroism or patriotism, fine, enthusiasm. It is patriotism, fine, or enthusiasm. All right. So z is carried. Similarly, when I say table, so you see t, then the symbol a, then the symbol b, then l. Between b and l, there is no vowel sound. It is because L is a syllabic consonant. Fine. Table. Fine. So L is stretched. So that's why with certain sounds we don't have to use vowel sounds. Otherwise, in most of the cases, fine, in 99% cases, every syllable has to have a kind of syllable. Then uh, after syllable division, we have stress marks. So that is altogether a different area. I mean, just a kind of introductory thing will not be sufficient. It has to be studied in detail.
Yes, sir. So with that, we've come to the end of the question and answer session, sir. In case you would want to give tips or suggestions to the participants, you can do so, sir.
Well, it's all about the matter of practice. So it doesn't come in one day. So never get frustrated, never get depressed. Keep practicing. And it is something like if you keep practicing, you never know that uh, the day you are rewarded, you realize that, oh, I speak so good English. So uh, the best thing is that keep practicing. That's the key, I believe, because I also come from such a background where I had to learn English. I did not acquire English, and we studied in government school. So I mean, English was a kind of luxury. So it is something like we did not inherit it. Through some hard work, whatever thing came in my hand in English, I used to read it, and today I feel quite rewarding.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for readily accepting the invitation. And we had scheduled the talk only on a very short notice. And thank you for all the information that you've shared with us today, sir. And I'm personally largely indebted for the affection that you've had, and on account of which you've accepted the invitation. So thank you, sir. And a big thanks to you for the efforts you've made towards English phonetics and making English phonetics look easy to all of us. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Yes, sir. So the feedback link is in the description, and the feedback link will close in about an hour from now. So all participants who have attended, please fill in the feedback form, and all those who fill in the feedback form will receive the certificate in about 10 days from now. Yes, sir, any closing remarks or anything that you would like to make, you can just talk to the participants.
Okay. Thank you, Amrita, for giving me this platform. It was really wonderful, listening to you, listening to your presentation, and at the same time sharing my views. It was like in this COVID situation, I had to dust and brush this phonetic file, because the place where I teach, I basically teach, say, the practical aspects of practical applications of language. Fine. So it is something like which was lying, and it is the area very close to my heart. I wanted to teach it whenever I got an opportunity, and through you I got that opportunity, and I got very good questions. Those questions really given me a lot of homework. When I go back, I need to go through my books and blogs once again. And there is a very wide scope for my own improvement. So it was really a wonderful experience. I thank you for inviting me, and I thank the audience for listening to me very patiently and throwing very valuable questions. I really owe a lot to them. I'm very grateful to them.
Thank you, sir. It was indeed a pleasure listening to you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Great.
Yes, once again to all the participants, the link will be open for about an hour, and then we'll be closing the links at around 1:30 or 1:40. So please fill in the feedback forms by the time, and all participants who fill in the feedback form will receive the certificates within 10 days from today. Thank you all.